Hey, welcome to Coffee to Scott. Get your coffee, get your Bible, grab a grab your pen and notebook. Let's pull up to the table and let's dig into our Gospel of Matthew through Hebraicized part 2. In our first part, we looked at messianic titles of son of David, son of Abraham, in Matthew's genealogy. Today, we're going to stay in Matthew's genealogy. Next week, we're going to step outside that genealogy, but I want us to look at four people that Matthew mentions in this genealogy that most people would say it's impossible or they are disqualified individuals, or because they're in the genealogy of Jesus, it disqualifies him. So the first one, and we're going to look at a couple of these rather short, and then there's one of these that I want us to kind of take more of an in-depth look at, because I don't think that a lot of people look at her story and see or understand what the people first century Hebrew people would have understood what Matthew was writing and what he writes and how he words it and what the scriptures tell us about this woman. Once we understand that, we can say, yeah, we understand why she is considered one of those breaks, one of those ruptures in the genealogy, but God put her in there anyway for a purpose, sending a message to the people who heard or read this gospel. The first one I want to look at, and there are four women. The first one we're going to look at, we read in Matthew chapter 1 and verse 5, excuse me, 5, and that is Tamar, not verse 5, verse 3, and that is Tamar. And we read her story in Genesis 38. You may already know her story, but let's just go over it, condense it real quick. She was married to two sons of Judah. One died, the other one God killed. And so Judah promises his third son to her, but yet he does not keep that promise. And even when the son becomes of age, he does not keep that promise. And Tamar is aware of this. She understands that Judah broke his promise to her, but we have to understand Judah probably had some concerns too, because he'd already lost two of his sons that he had given to this woman, to Tamar. And so, excuse me, Tamar finds out about this. She understands that Judah is coming to the town that she was in. She disguises herself as a prostitute, um, for lack of a better word. Her and Judah um, have intercourse together. She becomes pregnant. Judah hears of this pregnancy, but he doesn't know that who he was with was Tamar. But he had left tokens, we're going to call them tokens, that identified him as the individual that she was with, and she knew that it was Judah. So when Judah finds out that Tamar is pregnant, uh, he is highly upset about the situation. Long story short, he finds out that it was Tamar. She does bear a child through him. And um, Judah, in Genesis 38 and 26, Judah recognizes those tokens he left with her because she says, who do these belong to? And so he recognizes them, and he says this about Tamar: she is more upright. The King James, I believe, is going to say that she is more righteous than I am. because I wouldn't give her my son. And it says he was not physically intimate with her again. So that's the first one. That's the first, what we're going to call rupture or break in this genealogy line that Matthew is writing uh, about Yeshua. The second woman that is mentioned in Matthew 5 is Rahab. We read of Rahab in Joshua chapter 2. She was a prostitute, but she protected, she guarded, she helped the men of Israel escape. They told her, if you will hang this cord out your window, where Israel can see it when we attack the city, whoever's in your house will be spared. And here once again, because Rahab is known in all of Scripture and all of Christianity as a prostitute that let the men down and was redeemed, rescued because of the cord. But if you ask somebody who Rahab was, they're 98% of the time going to say, well, she was the prostitute in the city of Jericho. So this makes her another rupture, another break in this genealogy. The third woman is Ruth. We read of Ruth in the same verse that we hear of Rahab, and we can read about Ruth's story in the 4 chapters in the book of Ruth. And then Matthew comes to the fourth individual. He does not name her. And this is very important. He does not name her, but he identifies her as the wife of Uriah. We know her as Bathsheba, is how we know her. And we read of her in 2 Samuel chapter 11. So you got four women here. And so this is unusual to begin with. Let's just start here. It's unusual to begin with to find four women in the genealogy of Jesus, because genealogies were male only. You rarely were women named in these uh, Hebrew genealogies. Scandalous women were almost never named in genealogies. So, what is Matthew doing with these four women as he puts them in the genealogy? Well, he don't put them. Let me back up for a minute. He lists them because they are in the genealogy of Jesus. And Matthew brings this out. What is he doing when he brings this out? Matthew is writing, he's teaching, he's showing theology, not um, bookkeeping. He is teaching or showing theology, because in Hebrew thought, genealogies explain divine purpose. They justify legitimacy. They highlight covenant continuity despite rupture. This is the genealogy, the theology that Matthew is working on. He's wanting to bring out to the Hebrew reader, the Hebrew hearer of this letter, this gospel that he is writing, this good news. Let's look at it that way. He's Matthew's gospel, Matthew's good news, and he puts in, or let's say he spotlights these four women that society say they are disqualifiers. He highlights these four women in the family line, the genealogy of Jesus, when most people would have wanted to have left them out. But Matthew says, not me. I'm putting them in here, and there is a purpose why I am putting these four women in here. when we look at all four, each share a theme. A Hebrew reader or hearer, you're going to hear me say that a lot, would notice that maybe you and I don't see or hear in this genealogy. Each story, each one of their stories involves broken sexual norms. Yet God advances his promise through them. This prepares the reader for Mary's pregnancy, which also looks irregular. So, as I've said that, I want you to keep in mind that with these four women that Matthew is spotlighting, it makes the genealogy irregular. Um, as I said in the beginning, and I'll continue to say this throughout this teaching, is we can look at these as ruptures, or we can look at them as breaks. So, they would appear to be, to the natural eye, disqualifiers, reasons that people would say in that time period. Okay, we understand that Jesus is the Messiah. We understand that. But in that time period, they would not have understood that. And this is right here what we're looking at tonight are four reasons they would say, not him, not him. And so let's look at, before we continue, we all know the story. Well, let's continue. We all know the stories behind Tamar. I've already said it. She disguised herself as a prostitute. Rahab was a prostitute, um, wife of Uriah. Bathsheba, she was an adulteress. Ruth was a widow, and she was a Moabite. And so I want us to look at, and we're going to focus primarily, entirely on Ruth, because there are some things, because when you hear about Ruth, the main thing that you mainly hear about her is that she was a Moabite. And so that alone would disqualify her or show disqualification to those people of that time period. Let me make that very clear, because we're looking at what they would have understood. Okay, um, impossible for Messiah to come through that family. Let's say it that way. But we know here in 2026, we understand. So we understand that Ruth tells Naomi, "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." With that statement, she joins herself to the people of God. But you still possibly have this thing where she was a Moabite. God wouldn't accept her. God wouldn't accept her. But let's look at the story. We're going to go a little deeper with this story to get a good idea of what the people in this time period would have understood as they look at this. So in Ruth chapter 3 and verses 3 and 4, these are instructions that Naomi gives to Ruth. And I'm reading from the NET. So Naomi says to Ruth, "Bathe yourself, rub on some perfumed oil, and get dressed up. Then go to the down to the threshing floor. Don't let the man know you're there until he finishes his meal. When he gets ready to go to sleep, take careful notice of the place where he lies. Where he lies down. Then go uncover his legs and lie down beside him, and he will tell you what you should do." Now, the King James and some other versions are going to say uncover his feet. And I want you, let's keep this in mind, because I'm going to use the phrase uncover his feet a little bit later. So we see Naomi's instructions was go down to the threshing floor. So the threshing floor was outside of town. It was associated with a harvest celebration. It was a place where men slept overnight to guard grain. Often linked in the Hebrew Bible with joy, with abundance, wine, festivity, and it was a place of vulnerability, and there was a hint of risk at the threshing floor. So, for the Hebrew reader or hearer of this good news that Matthew is writing down, this is already a charged setting. We have to understand that the threshing floor was not a place that good, upstanding, um, moral women would have frequented. Uh, Not a place that you would see that type of woman. You would see the opposite women. You would see the women of ill repute hanging out around the threshing floor. But let's go back to so the first thing that Naomi tells Ruth to do is to wash yourself, anoint yourself with perfumed oil. So, wash and anoint yourself are phrases used for preparation in significant encounters. This was words used sometimes associated with uh, marriage readiness, preparing for a marriage. Uh, this does not equal seduction, but signals a transition and um, seriousness. We see kind of this same language in Exodus 19 when God tells Moses to tell the people to prepare for his visit. One of the things he tells them to do is to wash your clothes. He says, tell the men not to come near their wives. These people are to be clean. So they were transitioning. They had been uh, slaves in Egypt. He brings them out of Egypt. He brings them to the mountain. He says, I'm going to come visit you. So you need to prepare yourself. It's fixing to be a significant encounter. We can look at it this way: there's going to be a transition. We're fixing to exchange vows. We're fixing to enter into a marriage covenant together. So this is what Naomi tells Ruth to do: wash yourself and anoint yourself with perfumed oil. The second thing she tells Naomi to do is uncover his feet. Now, the word that is used for feet, or the word that the NET translates as legs, is the word for feet in Hebrew. And sometimes this word can function as a euphemism for genitals. An example of that is going to be in Isaiah chapter 7 in verse 20, where it says, at that time the Lord will use a razor hired from the banks of the Euphrates River. The king of Assyria will shave their hair off the head and private parts. It will also shave off the beard. We also see, and so in the King James, I think, it's going to talk about shaving the feet. Um, but in other versions of the Bible, other versions of the Bible, that scripture is going to say private parts, or it's going to say genitals. So we also see this in Exodus 4:25, Judges 3:24, 1 Samuel 20:24 and 3. So in ancient Near East, it is a, let me slow down, it is a Near Eastern idiom that pretty much signifies what is between the feet is implied by feet. Without getting R-rated, I hope you understand what's being said there. But let's move on. So, in the Hebrew mind, the phrase uncover his feet allows two possible readings. One is a literal, uncovering his feet to wake him. The other is suggestive, and it's a language that could be read sexually. Here's the thing, the text intentionally leaves the door open, but doesn't does not walk through it, if you understand. So the readers of Matthew's Good News, they when they come to Ruth in that genealogy, all of this stuff is playing in their mind about every woman, about Tamar, about Rahab, about Bathsheba, about Ruth. All of these things are going through their mind. So they understand that what this story is saying is this story at this point could go both way, either way. Either she uncovered his feet to wake him up, or she uncovered his genitals to wake him up. Because the next thing that Naomi tells her to do is lie down. So once again, you see a dual meaning. It means simply laying down to go to sleep, or this phrase is talking about sexual intercourse. So let me just stop here and say this: context determines meaning. Context, context, context. If you take the text out of the context, you're just left with a con. So we have to always, always put everything into context. And so I think what we're fixing to look at, we're going to see what actually takes place. Because now remember, these Hebrew people that are reading this gospel, they already view her as a rupture, as a break in the genealogy, as a disqualifier of Jesus being Messiah. And let me just state this again. You and I understand today that Jesus is the Messiah. So if we go to verse 8, we're going to see Boaz's reaction. The first thing Boaz asks is, "Who are you?" So that alone matters. Boaz does not assume intimacy. He is not portrayed as compromised. What am I saying? Boaz understands that Ruth is not, her intention is not to put him in a compromising position. Because keep in mind, Boaz is looked at as an honorable man in that culture, in that society. So he's not going to find him or place himself in a compromising position. So Ruth's response in verse 9 is, "I am Ruth, your servant." Then she says, "Spread your wings over your servant." Listen to what she says, "For you are a redeemer." So this right here, wherever the reader's mind was headed, these two statements, "Who are you?" and Ruth's response, where she says, "I am your servant, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Now, the reader or the hearer of Matthew's gospel understands as they're playing this back through their mind, as they're getting their understanding in what direction Matthew is headed. Now they understand there was no, let's just say, how would they say it? Um, in the Irish, there was no pity patty of the fingers between Ruth and Boaz because the language that Ruth uses is legal language, not seduction language. If you make sense, when she says to spread your wings, that is covenant protection. You kind of see that in Ruth chapter 2 when she calls him a redeemer. That is family obligation. So Ruth frames this moment as a formal request, not a sexual advance. So we see that. Let's look at Boaz's response to that. He said, "May you be rewarded by the Lord, my dear," reading from the NET. "This act of devotion is greater than what you did before. For you have not sought to marry one of the young men, whether rich or poor. Now, my dear, don't worry. I intend to do everything you propose, for everyone in the village knows." Listen to what he says. "Everyone in the village knows that you are," the NET is going to say, "worthy woman." The King James is going to say a virtuous woman. So this is crucial in the Hebrew narrative when a person explicitly names someone's moral status. That's a authoritative verdict. So Boaz, in what he says, plainly declares there was no pity patty of the fingers between him and Ruth at the threshing floor. So Boaz does several important things. Number one, he sends Ruth away before dawn to avoid gossip or suspicion. Then he ensures legal propriety. He publicly resolves the matter at the gate. This closes every possible door of immorality without erasing the tension. Because here's the thing, when Ruth washes herself, bathes herself, when she puts on the perfumed oil, when she puts on the finest clothes that she has to go down to the threshing floor, Ruth risks misunderstanding. She risks rejection. She's risking social harm. But Ruth steps out in faith, knowing that the decision to obey is costly, not safe. Her actions could have been misunderstood. By being obedient to Naomi, by let me say that again. By being obedient to Naomi, Ruth knew there was a large risk, but she chose to be obedient. And I'm going to say, I believe that she was trusting, had faith that if she was to step out and be obedient, that God would supply the need. Now, did Ruth know that she was going to be one of the four women in the genealogy of Jesus? No. Had no clue. Did Tamar? No. Did Rahab? No. Did Bathsheba? No. But God did. God did. God saw. He knew to the natural eye that these four women would appear to be disqualifiers. But he had a plan of redemption. Do we see, let's move on. Do we see anything in the ministry of Jesus that would reflect the actions of these four women? Or how, let's say this way, do we see Jesus offering in his ministry the redemption that these four women were given? And I'm not sure that's the best way to even frame what I'm trying to get at. But we see in his ministry that he's touching the unclean. When society says don't do that, Jesus says, I'm doing that. He defends the marginalized. When society says don't associate with them, he does that. God redeems those that would be considered disqualified, uh, ruptures, breaks, um, injurious to any genealogy they find themselves in. But we see Jesus redeeming those type of people in his ministry. Through Tamar, Messiah's line breaks through scandal, injustice, and failure. Through Rahab, she was a Gentile, she was a prostitute, she was an outsider. She is saved by a scarlet cord, by hanging that cord. So we're seeing this early shadow of redemption. Ruth, a Moabite, a widow, economically vulnerable. This is another image of redemption. She steps out and she receives redemption. Bathsheba, or as Matthew puts it, the wife of Uriah. But now here's what Matthew does that is different with her. He emphasizes David's sin, not hers, by calling her the wife of Uriah. The mind goes to what David did, even though she is an adulteress. She participated, she was an adulteress. But here again, we see redemption. When you look at David, you got David, Solomon, kings of Judah, ends up being a line of failed kings, exiles, judgment, ends in deportation to Babylon. So Messiah inherits national trauma, not triumph. When Jesus shows up, the nation is not in a good spot. They are occupied, they are oppressed. So Messiah doesn't show up and go on to reign or sit on a throne. But I want us to go back, and we're going to touch on this stuff as we go through this series of the Gospel of Matthew. But I just want to say that once again, in Matthew, huh, Matthew's genealogy is theological. It traces a Messiah who comes through brokenness. He comes through ambiguity. I can't even talk. And suffering. He comes through these things, not around it. Not around it. So as we prepare to finish this video up, I want us to take a look at how our Messiah continues to use what others may say are ruptures. Just quickly, let's look at the men that he chose to carry this gospel of a coming kingdom. He chose these men to carry a gospel of the law of the kingdom. He chose these men to carry and to share the culture of the kingdom. Let's look at those. So you have Peter, who was a fisherman, Andrew, his brother, a fisherman, James, the son of Zebedee, a fisherman, John, James's brother, a fisherman, Matthew, the writer who's teaching this theology in the genealogy of Jesus, a tax collector, Simon the zealot, excuse me, associated with the Jewish revolutionaries, a political movement, not a trade. You've got Philip, who was likely a fisherman because of where he lived was a fishing town. Bartholomew, also known as Nathan, um, his occupation is unknown. He could have possibly been uh, what we would call today a Torah student, but nothing firm. You got Thomas, also known as Didymus, also no occupation recorded. James, the son of Alphaeus, his occupation not really recorded, as sometimes he's associated with being a craftsman or manual labor, but once again, nothing that's firm evidence of what he did. You got Thaddeus, also sometimes known as Judas, the son of James. His occupation is unknown. And then, of course, we know Judas Iscariot, who was the keeper of the money for the group. And we also know that he is known as the betrayer of Jesus. So the question would be, were the disciples honorable men in the beginning? By Jewish and Roman social standards, the answer to that question is going to be mostly no. In the first century world, honor was tied to family status, religious training, moral reputation, public respectability, social, social usefulness to Rome or to the synagogue system. Most of the disciples of Jesus did not check those boxes. Peter, Andrew, James, John, they were fishermen, honest work, but of low status. Considered all of these men would have been considered uneducated laborers, and we see this in Acts 4. They were not socially influential. Matthew was a tax collector, viewed as a traitor, a sinner, viewed as being a collaborator with Rome, socially and religiously despised. Simon the zealot was, as I've already said, associated with revolutionary violence, considered dangerous by Rome, viewed as destabilizing by the Jewish leadership. And Judas Iscariot, well, as I've already said, he was the betrayer of Jesus. Others, Philip, Thomas, Bartholomew, largely unknown, no credentials, no titles, no public honor. They were just ordinary Galileans. Let's say it this way, they were just what society would have considered ruptures. They were breaks. They would be considered disqualified in most circles. But yet, God And I guess that's what I want us to take away from this video of the Gospel of Matthew. But God, God took these people that society and culture pushed off to the side, wanted nothing to do with them. But God, do you understand? Do we understand that God, and let me think about how I want to say this. God wrote his own, let me word this carefully because there may be some to take this and twist what I'm trying to say. Wrote his own family tree. The scriptures tell us that he manifested himself in flesh. And he chose to come through Tamar, to come through Rahab, to come through Ruth, to come through Bathsheba, through all of that disqualifiers, or through all of those ruptures, through all of those breaches that should have been, according to society, the Messiah should have come from a perfect, glorious family line. But God decided, when I step on the scene, I'm taking these people that others would reject. Now think, son of David, status. Messiah will be son of David. Son of Abraham, another, that's status. But as you begin to go down through the line, you see not just these four women, but other breaches of the line, other disqualifiers, just other things that society would say not possible, not possible, not possible. But God says possible, possible. Thank you for bringing your Bible, bringing your coffee, pulling up a chair as we sit and look at the theology of the genealogy of Matthew. And I ask you to do a couple of things for me to help me out. Like this video if you liked it, if you found it to be helpful, if it gave you some more understanding. Like the video. I ask that you comment on this video. I ask that you subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell. We're only going to be doing 3 videos a week. We're not going to bombard you with constant videos. We're going to do a weekly devotional. We're going to do a weekly Bible study where we pull up and we look deep into, right now, the Gospel of Matthew. And then we will do a video once a week on where we take a Bible. We're going to take a Bible and review it. Show you how it's a good translation, how it's a bad translation, what the Bible, as far as if it's a study Bible, is it a good study Bible? We're going to be taking study aids, reviewing those. We're going to show you how you can dig down deep. So once again, subscribe to my channel, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. Thank you for stopping by for Coffee with Scott at Covenant Cafe.